Hello friends, welcome to Insights ICANN initiative. Today's topic is about the Rajya Sabha rules. You know that there is much debate is going around the Rajya Sabha rules, especially regarding the rule 267 and rule number 176. Before we discuss the video components, first let us examine the syllabus mapping. This topic is related to your prelims point of view, as well as it is related to in mains point of view general studies paper 2. In general studies paper 2, you know the students, the polity and governance related to that, especially in relation to Indian polity regarding the effectiveness of Rajya Sabha compared to Lok Sabha, where this topic can be useful. But it is definitely going to be very useful in prelims point of view. Now let us go to the video components. First we will examine why it is in use, then what is the background regarding the rule 267 and rule number 176. Then I'll explain in Indian, according to Indian constitution or according to the parliament rules, how the executive will be controlled by legislature. You know the students, India follow the parliamentary form of government. The main feature of the parliamentary form of government is executive is responsible to legislature and executive is controlled by the legislature. So through which instruments in India union executive will be controlled by parliament. I will explain that. Then we will discuss about the importance of rule number 267 and 176 and what is this rule 267 and in which condition it will be used, and rule 176 also known as the short duration discussion and what is the procedure required for implementing, and what is the equivalence of rule 276 in Lok Sabha. So rule 267, what is the equivalence of rule 267 in Lok Sabha? In Lok Sabha, the instrument which is equivalent to rule 267 is adjournment motion. We will discuss about the adjournment motion also. And finally, we will draw the conclusion marks. First, let me explain about the concept. You know students, in India, we follow the parliamentary form of government. This is the crux, parliamentary form of government. You know the students, we have two types of governments, parliamentary form of government and presidential form of government. In parliamentary form of government, actually in 2022 UPSC prelims, they asked one question on the parliamentary form of government. So you try to recall students, which article of the Indian Constitution perfectly represents or perfectly reflects the parliamentary form of government. Which article of Indian Constitution reflect that India follow the parliamentary form of government? Okay, try to put the right answer below the comments. Fine. In parliamentary form of government, you know the students, so the executive is responsible to legislature. Executive deals with implementation of laws, whereas legislature deals with the making of laws. In India, how can we say that India following the parliamentary form of government? By observing various instruments. Okay, for example, if you look at some of the things such as question hour and 0 hour, question hour, 0 hour, 0 hour, okay. And if you look at the censure motion, adjournment motion, no confidence motion, and motion of thanks, okay. If you look at all these instruments, you will understand that through these instruments, executive will be controlled by the legislature. That means legislature will control the executive. Here executive means government, union government. Not only these, even parliamentary form of government can be reflected even in the parliamentary committees also. Okay. In class I told you so many times that parliamentary committees are two types. Okay. Standing committees and ad hoc committees. Standing and ad hoc. Ad hoc means temporary. Standing means permanent committees. Again, standing committees are two types. Departmental standing committees and finance committees. Okay. Tell me students, how many departmental standing committees are there at the moment? How many of them are operating? Tell me. Okay. So this is the way this executive will be controlled by the legislature. Now we are going to discuss about one of such instruments in this video. And these instruments are particularly available in the Rajya Sabha. They are not related to Lok Sabha. What are these instruments? These instruments are Rule 267 and Rule 176. So what is this Rule 267 and what is this Rule 176? Government of India, okay, actually this entire discussion came in the context of Manipur violence. Opposition parties are demanding that the issue related to Manipur violence, it should be taken up through Rule 267, whereas government is saying that they are ready to discuss the issue under Rule number 176. That is the reason there is much debate is going on between these two rules. In Lok Sabha, this Rule 267 is not going to be useful because already Lok Sabha had a very powerful instrument, that is the adjournment motion. Now let us see why it is in news. It is in news because the opposition party is demanding that the Manipur violence issue, actually in yesterday video we discussed about the Manipur violence. Manipur violence issue must be discussed under Rule 267. They are demanding that. Whereas government is saying that they are agreed that they are going to discuss this under Rule 176. In this context, first we'll see in background. So this entire discussion is on which issue? Manipur violence. And this discussion is going in which session of the Indian Parliament? Now the monsoon session of the Indian Parliament is going on. Session means group of working days. You know that students, according to Constitution, the maximum gap between the two sessions should not be more than 6 months. Okay. Actually, Constitution not particularly mentioned about the number of sessions. It only mentioned that the maximum gap between the two sessions should not be more than 6 months. And the gap between the session is nothing but recess. What you call? You can call it as recess. Okay. So in monsoon session, opposition party demanding that the Manipur violence must be taken up under Rule 267. Government is saying that they are ready for Rule 176. Now already I mentioned through which ways executive will be controlled by the legislature. I already mentioned. In parliamentary form of government, the main aspect is about executive is controlled by legislature, so that executive will not act arbitrarily and authoritarian government can be prevented. That government can be make sure it is accountable to the house. Next, 176 and 267. Both these rules will be used to discuss something related to emergency and something related to public importance, urgent issues and public related things. The only difference is, if you use the 176, okay, chairman will decide when the issue is going to be discussed, and chairman will allocate the time, whether it may be the next day or whether it may be the same day. And the maximum discussion time under 176 is only 2.5 hours, half an hour to 2.5 hours, maximum 2.5 hours. Whereas if you use the Article 267, if presiding officer allows the motion under under Rule 267, what does it mean? It means all the normal discussion will be suspended under Rule 267, and whatever the member is proposing, that will be taken up. That means it assumes a lot of significance. So there is no surprising that opposition parties are demanding for Rule 267. They want to suspend all the rules, all the business of the house, and they wanted this Manipur issues to be taken up before the house. Previous incidents. You know, now opposition parties are demanding, they are saying that, they are complaining that nowadays the chairman is not allowing any discussion under Rule 267. That means opposition parties are claiming that chairman is not allowing any significant issues to be discussed under Rule 267. The last time Rule 267, it was used in 2016. It was used in 2016 on the issue of demonetization. At that time, presiding officer was Hamid Ansari. If you look at the historically, Shankar Dayal Sharma, when he was Rajya Sabha chairman, 4 discussions were allowed. Bairan Singh Shekhawat, 3 times discussion was allowed under Rule 267. And recently Hamid Ansari, he allowed around 4 discussions under Rule 267. The last discussion in Rajya Sabha held under Rule 267, it was the discussion on the demonetization. Next, what is Rule 267? Like I said earlier, Rajya Sabha member can use this Rule 267 and he can introduce a motion. A written notice will be given so that all the listed business of the house, it will be suspended and this discussion will be taken and it will be discussed. Who can give notice? Any member in the Rajya Sabha. That means they are not necessarily related to the ruling party. Then the chairman has to allow. If chairman is dismissing, then it will never be allowed or it will never be introduced before the house. That is the controversy now. Opposition parties are claiming that the chairman is frequently not allowing this, the motion under Rule 267. The significance of this, as I mentioned earlier, if the presiding officer allows, then the discussion will be taken up by suspending all the regular business of the house. That means it reflects the significance of the issue. Obviously, it will attract the attention of the nation. Second one. So, generally, during this time, the government will require to respond on this particular issue, on whichever the issue you are taking up. That means obviously, now they are demanding that Manipur violence under under Rule 267. That means government has to respond. So government has to respond means obviously opposition parties will get more time and space either to criticize government or opposition party may demand certain initiative from the government. That is the significance of the Rule 267. Then, why it is contentious? Like I said earlier, chairman is not allowing, especially when opposition parties are very frequently giving motions under this rule. Next one is Rule 176. Government agreed that Manipur issue can be discussed under Rule 176. Here you have to understand Rule 176, also known as the short duration discussion. And the maximum duration allowed under this instrument is up to 2.5 hours. And once a member is given notice under this rule, presiding officer may allow the discussion on the same day or the next day. Generally, for this, at least 2 members has to sign. I will explain that in the procedure. Rule 176, it started in 1953. In the house business, at least 2 days a week dedicated for discussion under Rule 176. Whatever you discuss under Rule 176, it is not subjected to voting. Now let us see the procedure. The procedure is, if a member wants to raise the short duration discussion, he has to give notice to the Secretary General of the Rajya Sabha. You know the students, Rajya Sabha Secretary General is the head of the staff. The same position will be there in Lok Sabha also, Lok Sabha Secretary General. Both Lok Sabha Secretary General and Rajya Sabha Secretary General, alternatively, they act as the returning officer in the president election. Okay. So if you know, tell me. So when Draupadi Murmu was elected as Indian president, at that time who was the returning officer? Lok Sabha Secretary General or Rajya Sabha Secretary General? Answer. Okay. So when you are introducing the short duration discussion, you have to explain why you are introducing, and at least 2 members must sign on that particular motion. So this rule number 176 and rule number 267, they are confined to Rajya Sabha. The equivalent to 267 in Lok Sabha, it is an adjournment motion. Adjournment motion also means if a member is introducing the adjournment motion, all the listed business in the house will be postponed, and that issue under adjournment motion, it will be taken up by the house and it will be discussed. Okay. Adjournment motion generally considered as a severe censure, criticism on the government. It is generally used as an extraordinary device. It requires at least 50 members signature required for this adjournment motion, students. It is a censure against the government and it is not available to the Rajya Sabha. You have to remember. Adjournment motion must be very clear. It is not generalized one. If the issue is already discussed in that particular session, again you cannot introduce the adjournment motion on the same thing. If it is something under the court jurisdiction, under sub judice, adjudication by the court, in that condition also you cannot introduce the adjournment motion. And adjournment motion cannot be related to the privilege. You know that students, Article 105 of the Indian Constitution deals with the privileges of MPs and MLAs. Then what is the way forward? The way forward is Rajya Sabha plays very essential role in the Indian Parliament, especially with respect to the principles of federalism. By implementing more positive reforms in Rajya Sabha, we can enhance the functioning of the Rajya Sabha and we can contribute to the enhancing of India's democratic and inclusive governance. This is the conclusion. And let's see the question in yesterday's videos. Which of the following was not a reason for the recent violence in Manipur? Not reason. What is the not reason? The demolition of 3 unauthorized church by the state government. This is not the reason. Rest of the 3 are reasons related to Manipur violence. Let's see today's question. What is the purpose of Rule 267 in Rajya Sabha? A. Introduction of new bills, suspension of rules, short duration discussion on urgent matters, and adjournment motion. What is the ultimate purpose of the Rule 267? Mains question. Examine the role and functioning of the Rajya Sabha in the Indian Parliament and how Rajya Sabha complements the Lok Sabha in terms of checks and balances on executive, and contribute the effective functioning of the Rajya Sabha in Indian Parliament, and also analyze the significance of the Rajya Sabha as a platform for representing diverse interests and protecting the rights of the states. That means how the Rajya Sabha is performing in protecting the federalism in India. As we reach to the end of this video, let's quickly recall what we discussed in this video. In this video, we mainly discussed about the Rule 267 and Rule 276 and what is the basic principles of the parliamentary form of government, and previously how the Rule 267 was used and what is the complaint of the opposition parties, and the details regarding the Rule 267 and Rule 176, procedure regarding the 176, and we also discussed about the adjournment motion related to the Lok Sabha. This is the detailed analysis regarding the controversy surrounding Rule 267 and Rule 176.